Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today for the CREST Meet the Asia Advisory Board. I'd like to welcome you all here today and hope that you've got your questions at the ready to ask the panel who are with you on this webinar. Just before we get started and I hand over to some introductions to the panel, I'd just like to go through that this is your opportunity to ask that panel any of your questions that you have. Please, if you could type them into the question pane, we will ask the panel and get those answered for you. If you have any other questions that we don't get to by the end of this webinar, then please feel free to email us. There will be an email address at the end, and we can pass those over to the panel to see if they can get back to you on those questions. So we'll get started. And so first of all, I would just like to introduce the panel. So I will hand over into a second to Paul Craig from Vantage Point, John Lloyd from Sabre Security, and Benjamin Harris from F-Secure, and Ian Glover from CREST. They're all here to answer your questions today, so please feel free. You'll see at the bottom of that slide just the other members that are on the advisory board that couldn't be with us today on this panel. So thank you very much. But just before we get started, there will be an update by Ian Glover after the panel introduce themselves, and then we can get to your burning questions. So thank you very much. So if I could hand over to you, Paul, to get started. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Paul Craig. I spent about 20 years in offensive security, and now on the CREST Executive Committee, trying to help champion CREST within Southeast Asia. Within Singapore, Indonesia, and within the region.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. And if we could go over to John. Oh, John, I think you're on mute at the moment. Sorry.
My bad. I'm John. I'm the head of Asia for Kasaba Cybersecurity. I've been in Asia for my whole career. I started with Trend Micro in Taiwan. Now I primarily work in manufacturing and regulated industry, and my biggest involvement with CREST is out of Malaysia, working for regulation and standardization of security policy.
That's great. Thank you very much. And over to you, Benjamin. Oh, I think you're on mute at the moment. Sorry.
Sorry, it's Wednesday. Computers are hard on a Wednesday. Hello, everyone. I'm Benjamin Harris, Technical Director for F-Secure Consulting based in Singapore. I've been out in Asia now for just over 7 years. My involvement in CREST is obviously as a member of this Asia Advisory Board, but I'm also an assessor as well. Thanks, Debbie.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And over to you, Ian.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ian Glover. I'm the President of CREST International. So I oversee the different advisory boards in EMEA, in Southeast Asia, Australasia, and the Americas.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ian. And so thank you very much for our panel to attend today to answer those questions that I'm sure you will be typing in that question pane as we speak. So over to you, Ian, just for a update really within CREST. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Let's go to the first slide. Lovely. So I just thought I'd provide a very quick update of some of the things that we've been doing this year. It's obviously been a very difficult year for everybody, and we've had difficulties in all regions. So I'd really like to thank the people that have continued to support us through this, particularly in Southeast Asia. I thought I'd start with the company membership. We have significantly increased our company membership during the period, and a big contributor to that is the Southeast Asia region. Southeast Asia is now the second largest of our regional membership. So what we're seeing is a huge amount of interest from the company element, which probably means that there is significant interest from the buying community are requesting those services. One of the most significant areas we've been building on is obviously the penetration testing side, which is traditionally where we've come from. But we're seeing more and more interest in terms of our incident response services that are provided by our members in Southeast Asia. And there's also been a very big move in terms of the accreditation of SOCs. So from our perspective, what we're seeing is a continued level of interest in our primary areas, such as penetration testing, threat intelligence, incident response, and SOC. But in some parts of the world, we're now looking at things like physical penetration testing to come out with some accredited standards in those sorts of areas as well. So we're very much following the needs of the buying community, particularly the regulated and government community, in terms of the services that they would like from trusted organisations. And we're very much following the strategy of our member organisations, many of whom have multiple memberships. In addition to this, what we've also done is we have been continuing to look at the accreditation process, making sure that it's fit for purpose, making sure that it's up to date, and we have further developed the membership portal, and we have advisory groups in different parts of the world who are looking at the questions that we ask our members prior to them becoming accredited by CREST. If I move over to the professional qualification side, then we've invested very heavily this year in a number of areas. We believed that there was a lack of a career pathway within the threat intelligence community. So under our CTIPS group, which is one of the focus groups we run within CREST for threat intelligence, we've now got a whole pathway. So we have an entry point at practitioner level, we have the mid-range at registered, and then we have the certified level qualifications in those areas. So really trying to help people to move into threat intelligence as a career pathway, and then to provide a structured process for them to go through. We've also pump primed some training. There was certainly a lack of training in some of the threat intelligence areas. And so where there isn't things available, then CREST tries to pump prime the marketplace to make sure that there are development activities that are available. We've also been looking at the at SOC, and again, we're looking at some of the SOC management roles, and qualifications are being developed in there as well. So what we don't want to do is to completely reinvent things. What we want to do is very much stay in the core areas. So all of our professional qualifications that we run still align with the company membership element. But very importantly, I think that we are developing, I think, very structured, well organised and well understood career pathways for people in all of the disciplines that we provide support in. Obviously, tying those two things together is what we've always done, looking at the company membership for the provision of trusted companies, tying that together with skilled, knowledgeable and competent people to run what we would class as schemes. And for this year, there's been a huge amount of interest in the schemes that we operate. We have, for example, been working in the aviation space in continental Europe and in the UK. We've developed a new assurance program called Assure on behalf of the Civil Aviation Authority, and that takes into account the NIST directive, which looks at critical national infrastructure, and we tie in an element of assurance with the technical assessment. And I think that's probably the best implementation of the NIST directive that we've seen globally. We have also looked to extend some of the existing processes that we have, particularly in the simulated target attack and response. So again, on the company membership side, we've continued to review and make sure that those qualifications and the company accreditations are up to date. But we've been working with regulators in a number of parts of the world, particularly in the financial services area. So we have launched this year something called STAR-FS. We've done that with the Bank of England, which is the PRA, and we've also done it with the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK. And that was originally based on the CBEST process, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, but we've developed that quite a lot further. We have changed some of the responsibility of the regulators to make it more scalable and to make it, I think, much more structured in terms of the way that it can be implemented in country. And that has been launched in the UK. It's been launched in the UK fairly low key. But what it means is that the original 38 systemic risk areas within financial services within the UK market has now been extended to their tier 2, which is about 250 organisations that will now fall into that category of review under the STAR-FS scheme. And under the FCA, that will include building societies and also insurance companies. So that's likely to add many hundreds of other organisations into that pot. And I think the STAR-FS process is, I think, the one that we should be promoting globally. And to that end, what we've been doing is to work with the regulators both in the UK and in continental Europe to develop some more generic guidance in that particular area. So the STAR-FS process, I think, is really good, and I think that will be the way that a lot of the regulators in different service sectors and in different countries will move for the future. Under that scheme as well, we are currently looking at extending, the regulators are looking to extend to utilise some of our maturity model assessments. So where under a simulated attack, you can't take things right the way through to a major problem. What we are now doing is working with the regulators to utilise things like our cyber incident response maturity model, as well as the threat intelligence maturity model. And interesting, we have the Bank of England looking very carefully at the threat intelligence. So in other words, trying to establish how financial services utilise the threat intelligence within their community and within the organisations that they regulate. So a huge amount of work has been done in that, and I think there are really good lessons that we can learn and we can promote in different parts of the world. We're very much trying not to reinvent the wheel. What we're trying to do is to add to the body of knowledge all the time to make everybody better. There's some other ones that I think I was going to mention. We are working very closely with the Department of Defense in the US under their CMMC program. That is looking to provide assurance of their complete supply chain. So around about 600,000 organisations are in the DoD supply chain, and all of those will be subject to the CMMC. And what they're asking us to do is to accredit companies and run the professional qualifications that would fit into that process as well. In the US, we're also looking at the Centre for Internet Security, and I think their technical standard is extremely good. And again, we've been asked to do essentially to do the accreditation of that as well. So all of a sudden, we've now got a much broader area. Under the simulated target attack and response, we have been continuing to work with telecoms organisations in different parts of the world. And now what we're seeing is a lot more government schemes being run to look at government departments and other parts of the critical national infrastructure. So that simulated targeted attack, I believe, will grow quite significantly. And I also think the threat intelligence element of that will grow quite significantly as well. And I think if there's something missing from the Southeast Asian market, I think it's how to utilise that threat intelligence in a more effective way within the organisations that our members support. And I see that happening much more in the future. So that's something I think that we should look at very carefully for the advisory board to make sure that we provide the tools and services necessary to move in. Moving back to the professional qualifications, we've invested very significant funds to try to overcome some of the difficulties we have in terms of delivering our practical examinations. So the vast majority of our written and long form examinations are delivered in Pearson VUE in more than 50 countries now. And we have more than 4,000 people that currently hold our qualifications. But it's quite difficult to scale some of our practical examinations. So we've invested around about £500,000 to develop a new platform, and this will allow practical examinations to be run at Pearson VUE centres. I think that will be a massive step forward. And we are looking at the first quarter of 2021 to beta test some of the examinations we've got in place. And then we're looking at the second quarter of 2021 to launch. The first one that we will do is a registered level penetration test. It will be slightly more comprehensive than our existing CRT examination, and again will be used to demonstrate the practical application of this. And at the same time, we're also developing one for simulated target attack and response, so slightly under the CSAS that we currently run. But again, what we're trying to do is develop a career pathway. So under the target attack, I don't believe you will ever start right at the practitioner level. I might be proved wrong on that, but that's my opinion at the moment. So what we're trying to do is to come in at the sort of mid-range certified level for that type of simulated attack. And then we will roll the other practical examinations into the same platform. So that means that you'll be able to take your examinations at Pearson VUE centres almost anywhere in the world, and will allow us a lot more scale and a lot more practicality in terms of how we do these things. In terms of professional development, then we have been trying to formalise the process that we have with our approved training organisations. We don't accredit training organisations, and CREST itself doesn't provide training. But we've been working with the training providers to try to improve the quality of what's delivered and to tie it more closely in with our syllabus areas. We already see a lot of professional training organisations linking their courses to our qualifications anyway, but what we're doing is making that much more strong for the future. And also we are building on our academic partner program as well. And again, I think that this is an area in Southeast Asia where I think we could do much better than we currently do. So again, if anybody's got contacts within the academia or even within the training organisations in Southeast Asia, please let us know. And what we'll do is we'll try and build those relationships to make sure there is a pipeline of really good people entering the industry, and also to make sure that we can train and develop them into the professional pathways that I've described under the qualifications. The final point I was going to mention was some of our knowledge sharing. So we have some really good projects that we are currently undergoing. So we regularly update our research activities, but there's quite a lot going on in that area at the moment. We are running development areas to look at the establishment of effective incident response teams, and to look at the qualifications, both technical and non-technical, that should be used as credentials for people working in that area. And we're doing that for a number of organisations, but there's a very interesting project we're running on behalf of the UK government in that area as well. And all of that information will be made available, and all of that work on those sort of common areas of development will be available to everybody. And we'd really encourage people from Asia to participate in those. I did mention last time I did one of these presentations about some funding we received from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is part of their provision to ensure that banking services are available to the poor. Their view is that if you want to raise somebody out of poverty, then what you need to do is to provide them access to secure, well-governed, well-structured banking services. We have been asked to look at the level of maturity in 8 countries in Africa and Asia, and that work has been done. We've developed a whole new international maturity model assessment, which we believe will roll out to other parts of the globe. It's a very comprehensive review, and it fits in very well with some of the other international maturity models that we've seen. It combines both qualitative, so we look at things like national security policy, we look at policing, we look at information exchanges, we look at the level of maturity of the service providers in country, particularly for the areas that we are responsible for, so penetration testing, incident response, SOC provisions, etc. And then it looks at both academia and also training, and then it looks at some of the other developmental activities. So there's a lot of work we've done establishing around about 220,000 individual references to in-country material. So it's a huge amount of effort that has gone through in terms of looking at that qualitative analysis. And then we combine that with a quantitative analysis, which is the first time we've seen this type of approach. So we put out an invitation to tender to our threat intelligence service providers to help us with the creation of non-intrusive vulnerability analysis and some threat assessment. And basically what we've done is we've taken up to the top 100 financial organisations in the countries that we've looked at, and we've run that non-intrusive vulnerability analysis and also threat assessments against those, really to provide some key benchmarks in terms of the level of cyber resilience and their ability to protect themselves against, I would say, up to sophisticated level attacks. So this combination of qualitative and quantitative information will, I think, be utilised by regulators and governments, and we've got a huge amount of interest in that already. So in addition to the countries that are involved in the scheme, there are probably another 6 or 7 that we are now starting the process of going through this maturity model assessment, and we plan to do this in areas of Southeast Asia through the advisory board for next year as well. very much providing, I think, really good market information. It will also help governments and regulators to focus their attention and activities, and will provide them with effective key performance indicators. I think the other really useful thing out of that will come around about 20 generic good practice guides. So what we've done is we've identified where there are gaps. Two examples, for example, is there's very little guidance in terms of how to establish a cybercrime unit, and there's very little information about how to provide an intervention program to stop young people being groomed into cybercrime. We already started the process of writing guidance, generic guidance in those areas. So this year you'll see a huge increase in terms of the number of generic guides that are available. So that's really a very quick overview, because we are doing so much and it is such an exciting area. But the company membership continues to grow, now with more than 250 members globally. Professional qualifications, we've got more than 4,000 people qualified now, and we can deliver in multiple countries, and we have a good strategy for delivery. Professional development, I think, is really key, and we're doing more and more to support that. And the knowledge sharing is just becoming much more effective in terms of the outputs that we are providing to support the community. Thank you, Debbie.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ian, for that update. So we've had some questions start rolling in, so we'll get through to the panel. So if we kick off with the first question, so this is around certifications. So there seems to be no demand for advanced certifications such as CCT, IMF from markets. Testers get to CRT and don't go any higher. What are the plans to improve this?
Did you want me to start that? We've done quite a lot of work looking at this, and I think there are a number of areas that we are providing support. I think if anybody goes onto our website, there's a button at the top right hand side that is the the service selection platform. And that actually provides the ability to identify organisations that have got qualified people employed at the different levels. So we don't really want a red, green, amber type approach. We want, because it's actually very complicated because the number of different services that are provided and at the different levels. But there is now the ability to identify the organisations that operate at the different levels and employ people that hold the relevant qualifications. So I think the selection process now is much better. I think what we'll see is a downward push. So we are already seeing in Southeast Asia things coming out from MAS and things coming out from the Hong Kong Monetary Authority in terms of the minimum requirements for conducting certain activities, particularly under the ICAR scheme and some of the work that MAS is doing on their schemes. And I think that will have quite an impact in terms of having to move people through the certified levels and into those targeted attacks. I think once you can see the benefits in terms of utilising the more senior individuals and more highly qualified and credentials individuals, then there will be a much greater push in terms of the level of services that are requested from people holding those qualifications. So I think globally, in Europe, what we're seeing is a lot more people moving towards the certified level. And in Southeast Asia, I think we are moving forward with the process. But I do believe that we've had some difficulties in terms of people having access to those examinations. And so that's why we're investing so heavily in terms of moving that process forward with the examination development. I don't know if anybody else has got anything to add to that. If people believe there are blocks, then let us know and we will try to release them.
Hi. So yeah, I think I'd add to that. So I think as well we have to recognise that CREST has developed as a recognised qualification over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, from recollection, in Singapore and the region, from essentially nowhere to what it is now. Obviously, as the buying community becomes more educated and they begin to understand the differentiation between the types of consultants that they're dealing with. And obviously, as the demand for services goes above kind of typical penetration testing, these qualifications like CCT IMP, CCT App, CSAS, CSAM, etc., become more and more relevant to the types of projects that clients are expecting us to deliver. And so I think as we see that shift in the market as well, where the strategic services or the services requested kind of become more advanced and more focused on understanding individual capability that's delivering that particular service, again, that will also help encourage demand for these particular certifications. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ben. Does Paul, John, have you got any comments at all?
Really, just to second what Ben said, I think within Singapore and the market, we see a maturity within clients. And clients are still really developing and learning. They've progressed from, oh, I need pen testing, I'm not sure why, to now I need pen testing and I need a CREST accredited company. And I believe that will continue to grow and mature into seeing the different differentiations between the certifications and really what value that brings. But it still just seems so sort of nascent at the moment.
Yeah, I think the issue that we face is like, right now, a lot of companies are asking for CREST certification because government tenders require CREST certified in there. And so CREST as a brand name, as someone as being a certifying body, is now recognized. But it's going to take a few years before companies start to realize that there's different levels within CREST and different levels of certification. So it's really, to echo the other guys, it is maturity.
I mean, so just to tack on, I don't want to beat the horse completely dead, but I think as well, we are beginning to see that level of maturity or that level of request in terms of certifications already come. If you look at things like HKMA's ICAS, where they are already kind of calling out specifically more advanced CREST certifications, Bank of Thailand's iPen test is requesting these certifications as well. The demand is definitely growing, at least within the financial space. And in my experience, at least in the last 7 years, the financial space is typically the space that leads the pack in terms of demand, and the other industries will typically then follow on.
That's great. Thank you very much to you all.
I think the only thing that I would add to that is that what we need to do is to make sure that we do try and educate the buying community to understand the difference between a registered level and a certified person. So I think those elements are really important. I think it's up to the community to try to make sure that the lists of qualifications are actually fit for purpose, and that there are real equivalencies as well. And I think, Ben, that's sort of what you're alluding to, I think. Sorry, Debbie.
That's fine, don't worry. That's great. Just to add on to that, what I was going to say is the person that was asking that question has actually said that they would like to see CREST sort of do more marketing around the CCT and really in the area. So that's something that obviously we can take away as an organisation and look at. So that's quite important. So if we don't have anything else to add to that question, with regards, we'll move on to the next one. So how do you see the Asia Advisory Board working with other regional CREST boards? So for instance, how involved is the advisory board with regional regulators such as HKMA on developing their frameworks and opportunities for CREST members?
Maybe if I cover the intent. So we move through different levels of maturity within the different regions. So the way that we start a regional chapter is invested from CREST International. So in other words, there is either funding that comes from a central, which could be a government or a regulator, to help us, and then CREST International provides the funding to establish that chapter. We then move into a model where I believe that we are looking at a self-funded, but it's based very much on a volunteer basis, because we're not generating sufficient money in country at that point to support the operation of the chapter. And then we move into a fully funded model. And I believe that in the Southeast Asian region, we are into that fully funded model. What I would very much like to see is dedicated resource. We invest heavily back into Southeast Asia. There is a formula that we utilise. So every member that comes through that recognises Southeast Asia as a region, payment is made into the region to support and move forward with things like the marketing, which is one of the areas that was raised as a question. But what I would like to see is more dedicated people operating on the ground. So it's our intention with the budgets for next year to put more emphasis with our partners from ASTRI and our partners from AISP to make sure that we have dedicated resource that is funded by the income that comes back into country. So we're looking very carefully at the budgets for this year to make sure that that's spent in direct support and direct marketing activities within country. We would also like to tie in the focus group. So we have a focus group for each of our service line and service areas. And we'd like to see a lot more activity in Southeast Asia looking at supporting those focus groups and really becoming thought leaders in those areas, really rather than being receivers, but being contributors of material and information.
Okay, that's great. Is there anything from the panel that you'd like to add to Ian's comments there? Okay, thank you.
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Ben. So I'll move on to the next question. So hopefully I get this correct as I'm reading it out. So this is regarding individual professional qualifications. So is there any plans or roadmaps to further expand into focus on different niche disciplines within penetration testing, say SCADA or DCS, etc.?
I think that probably comes back to me again. I'm sorry, ask the Southeast Asian exec, and at the moment it's ask Ian. So I will try and pass more things over. We have been actively looking at. I prefer to call it ITOT. So making sure that the operational environment is also covered, and also quite a lot more work in terms of making sure that some of the mobile apps and things are probably better included. If we were a for-profit organisation, what I'd be saying is we are introducing a whole new portfolio. But as a not-for-profit, what we're trying to do is to build as much as we possibly can into the existing examinations. We don't want to overtax the industry. We don't want to make it too difficult. And we do want to recognise that people have multiple disciplines and multiple skills within what they do. So if you look at some of the mobile elements, there is certainly going to be more mobile looking questions and evaluations within the new registered level examinations. And certainly we're trying to build mobile both into the application side at certified level as well as the infrastructure. So that's very much a split between those two. I mentioned the work that we are doing with people like the Civil Aviation Authority. As part of that accreditation, they are looking specifically at the requirements for ITOT, particularly for the operational systems, both within aircraft and within the operation of the airports. And therefore, the current approach we've been taking is to look at the credentials that individual companies and individuals put forward as being suitable in that area. We've been doing that now for almost a year, and what we've got is a really good background in terms of what is good and what is recognised within that part of the industry. And we're going to come out with a strategy for either the development of ITOT related examinations, pointing to existing credentials that already exist, or amalgamating elements into our existing examination process. So we are very much trying to do this in terms of the sort of SCADA environment, but we're trying to do it in quite a controlled way, and we're trying to make sure that we don't, again, overtax the industry in terms of making people hold multiple examinations and certifications, and also to recognise the ones that they currently have. So there is a really good piece of work, I think, that's going to happen this year looking at that. And again, I would expect the people on this panel to be contributing to the development in those sorts of areas. But again, views on what you think is good within the marketplace or what you think is missing would really help us to focus our attention.
Great, thank you very much, Ian. Is there any other comments from the panel on that one?
None from me.
I guess the only thing I'd add is I see this as a multi-pronged kind of conversation along with the education around what CCT Inf and CCT App and CSAT and CSAM are for. So while we are helping clients understand the kind of breadth and the relevance of those certifications for different projects and different engagements, this is when the genuine gaps, I think, will be identified for additional certifications or additional pathways or specialisms to be identified. My view is that both of these things happen at once. There's likely to be overlap in some places, and I think it's something that we can continue to tackle. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Ben. Paul, have you got anything to add at all?
I mean, personally, I see the huge growth of mobile coming up within the technology space, and I would expect, as Ben said, that to be really strengthened and seen as a little bit of a specialty exam moving forwards. I mean, other exams such as SCADA and such, maybe a little too specialized and should be included in other types of exams, like what Ian mentioned.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And John, have you got anything else to add?
Nope.
No, brilliant, thank you. So this question really, I think, is not directed necessarily to Ian, so thank you. This might help the rest of the panel, this one. So how do you see the ongoing situation in Hong Kong in relation to China, both affecting the members and affecting the industry out in Asia at the moment?
Do you mean the political situation, or which?
I think it would probably be the political situation. They don't actually say, but I would say that's probably what they're referring to. If it's not, that person has the option.
Yeah, maybe I could contribute to this. If you look at policy decisions that are made within China, and now Hong Kong being very much classified as China, they would actually be very different to the policy decisions made in Western countries. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Hong Kong actually have their own cybersecurity policy which followed China.
To add to that, so I don't think I'll be as brave to say that Hong Kong is definitely China, but I guess the way I've seen it is over the years, China has definitely developed their own sort of cybersecurity practices, and they've had expectations in terms of licensing in country in the mainland on what they expect their own consultants and consulting companies to hold. If the political space with Hong Kong develops further to the point where China begins to perhaps broaden where these laws apply to, we may see additional requirements being placed upon cybersecurity consultants and companies in terms of licensing to operate within that region or country.
I guess I'll answer in two parts. I think in Hong Kong, it's inevitable that politically it's going to be effectively another province of China, like outer Shenzhen, and then like it's not a bad thing. But like what it happens in our industry is that in mainland China, especially for the big state-owned enterprises, it's difficult to do a lot of high-end boutique kind of cybersecurity assessment because the source code for apps like Didi and stuff are considered state security secrets. So they have to be done by Chinese nationals. And then the few there's not much overlap between people who work on the mainland and then people who work outside, because like imagine if you were working for Didi or you're working for Zhongte and then you want to go work at Microsoft won't let you review their source code because there's some suspicion. So I think that China is doing a lot to improve the standard of cybersecurity within mainland China, and I think that will develop. But I can't really comment politically how it'll affect us as people from outside of mainland China. For Malaysia, I think it's a bit simpler. The political turmoil going on in Malaysia hasn't really affected its security planning. The NACSA, Bank Negara, and the government, they put together a cybersecurity spending bill, and I think it was announced last month of around 3 billion ringgit. And this was started when UMNO was originally in power, before the first change in power. And so I think that regardless of the political entity in Malaysia, all of Malaysia realizes that it needs to advance, put more protection on its industry. It needs to raise the standard of security, and it needs to improve its accountability and its transparency if it wants to continue and take advantage of its good education and demographics to move forward.
That's great. Thank you very much to you all for answering that question. So if there are any other parts that you don't feel that your question has been answered, or there's anything that you want to add, please feel free to type in the question pane, and we can add that one on. So what are the advantages of engaging a CREST accredited company? You would like to start that one?
Yeah, maybe I'll start off on this one.
Cool.
So the real difference between a CREST accredited company and, say, a company that has just security consultants or people with technical knowledge is that there's actually a company framework that all CREST companies have to follow in terms of how they handle information, their policies, their procedures. There needs to be a process for things like handling complaints. It really gives companies a framework to operate in a secure and sort of sound manner that is lacking from other cybersecurity certifications, which typically don't cover how a company should act, but more cover how the consultant should act.
Yeah, I think the standardization across organizations really helps in an industry like cybersecurity, where so many of the problems aren't well formed. Like, it's really difficult to pick a correct consultant or to even hire a developer, because everyone has different background, and even a lot of existing certification get translated in different countries or whatever. But when we talk about companies, it standardizes it. So we can look at all these companies are the same. They're all held to a certain standard of practice. And then you can really focus on which CREST member party provides a competitive or a qualitative advantage.
I'd agree with what John and Paul have both said. The key areas for me are standardization in terms of approach, methodology, service standard, and then kind of overarching all of that, it's, as Paul and John mentioned as well, it's the ethics and the code of conduct that CREST companies are expected to abide by, not just in terms of how we treat employees or how we train employees or develop consultants, but also how we engage clients, and the onus on us to actually inform clients to do materially positive actions versus perhaps things that we think may not be in their best interest.
Great, thank you very much.
I think there are different communities as well. So I think for the government and regulators, we are, I think, working very hard to make sure that that we develop the capacity within the service sector to support the government regulated schemes, and also the capability of those organisations to deliver. And I think we are providing those industry metrics. So I think that we, through our membership, actually help to mature the overall ecosystem that's delivering. And I think that is a valuable contribution in its own right. I think from the buying community, then that access to trusted service organisations utilising highly skilled, knowledgeable and competent individuals is really the most important aspect. And certainly some of the black art in terms of procuring, say, SOC services and things, I think we are providing a lot more support in that particular area, and also through the use of our procurement guides and industry benchmarks. And really importantly, the things like the complaints and the consistency of approach, all of those things I think are very important to the marketplace. So I think the benefits to the buying community are fairly obvious once you start to explain them. But I do think that it's incumbent on the buying community to request good quality services, and that will help to mature the overall marketplace. What we see in different parts of the world is if the buying community aren't very savvy in terms of how they procure services, then the supply industry really doesn't react to it, and they continue to get poor quality services. And we've seen that in quite a few places in the world, not so much in Southeast Asia. So that ability for the buying community to influence what the service providers do, I think is very important. So I do think it's a combination of the two. We as CREST need to make sure we set the standards. The service providers need to meet those standards. But the buying community, we need to educate them to make sure that they both understand the benefits, but also understand their ability to influence the market and what the service providers do. So the more mature the buying community becomes, I think the greater their level of understanding about why CREST membership is important and why utilisation of CREST qualified people, or at least suitably credentialed individuals, is so important.
Thank you for that. And we're nearing the end of the webinar time, but if it's okay with the panel, I'd like to just get in one more question, if that's okay with you all.
Absolutely okay.
Thank you very much. So given the increased focus on virtual banks, particularly in Singapore, do you see there being a different form of accreditation similar to like CBEST, AASE, for those types of the companies to adopt or work towards?
It's an interesting question, and I think we're probably in an interesting place to comment. But obviously, I think the best people to comment would probably be the MAS. I think for all intents and purposes, the expectation is that digital banks will have to align to the regulatory standards that already exist. So the TRM being as an example. So annual pen testing, proper SDLC processes, incident response retainers, etc., will likely all apply to digital banks at the same time. What will be interesting is to see whether any of those practices get tiered in the same way that HKMA uses the CRAF framework to tier different financial organizations. But my guess would be that at the first instance, digital banks are going to be viewed with more skepticism as opposed to less than the more traditional wholesale and retailer banks. And so we may see increased regulatory scrutiny.
Great, thank you.
So
I agree.
Sorry.
Paul, John, who wants to go on that one?
All first.
Lovely, thanks.
Okay, so I mean, really considering the digitization of all industries, I don't think we're going to see much difference between digital bank and what we call a physical or like a classic bank. I think the two are merging very much so. It's just that everything is becoming far more technology driven. So I would expect to see things like TRM actually expand to cover more aspects of how we're interacting with a bank. We're no longer walking into banks using apps to talk to the bank. I would expect to see more push from MAS in terms of securing this digitization. And really every bank and every service really in Singapore becoming a digitalized service.
Oh, we got some feedback. Ben, can you mute for a second? Yeah, thanks. I agree with the two of them. I mean, digitized banks are different in one way, but we already have plenty of regulated financial firms that don't have retail branches, that pretty much only exist online, and there's a lot of strong regulation. I think that the regulatory push and what we've seen over the years is that MAS is going to become more prescriptive and more granular. And I don't know if tiered is the word I would use, but it's going to be specialized to address the needs of a digital bank versus a retail bank. But I think as security practitioners, there's not going to be much difference because every industry regulated by the monetary authority will be subject to stringent security regulation.
That's great, thanks, John. And Ian, have you got any comments to make?
Yeah, so under the Gates Foundation work, we've been looking at microfinance and also the challenger banks. There will be at least 3 new guides that are attempting to identify if there are additional requirements for either microfinance or challenger banks from a security perspective. Under the Bank of England's and CBEST scheme, they've already looked at certainly one challenger bank in quite a lot of detail. So I think the regulators are waking up to this already and are trying to do more. And I think we have to recognise that a lot of the challenger banks and microfinance organisations are utilising existing financial services infrastructure. So there is still a need to make sure that the infrastructure this stuff runs on is appropriately protected, and to make sure the interfaces onto those platforms are well managed. So this is a really hot topic for us. And as I say, for this year, we have plans to write 3 guides, which at least discuss the issues, if not come out with some more considered conclusions. So again, if anybody would be interested to contribute to that, we would welcome that very much.
Sorry, just one thing I would add. It just occurred to me as you were talking in, but I think one thing we're seeing increasingly in Hong Kong and Singapore as well is not just necessarily digital banks, but also neobanks, which are beginning to take advantage of regulatory exemptions to provide similar functionality to what a digital bank would provide in terms of accounts, credit lines, debit accounts, etc., but are falling more into the payment space and actually operating outside of that regulatory space in the same way at the moment. Obviously, for that kind of note, they don't fall typically under the TRM. And so I think over the next couple of years, depending on how these neobanks really end up competing with the digital banks, especially given the licenses that have just been issued, that could be a very interesting space to see how the MAS and HKMA kind of respond to those, necessarily kind of increasing their regulatory scope or defining specific regulatory scope for these quasi-neobanks.
That's great. Thanks, Ben. And thank you to you all for answering that question and all the other questions that have been put to you today. We do have a couple of questions still that have come in, so I will go back to those people, and hopefully, if it's all right with you guys, I can email you the question and you can always come back to me with any answers if that's all right.
Yeah, definitely.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So unfortunately, we've got to come to an end today, and I'd like to thank the panel, John, Ben, Paul and Ian, for attending today and answering your questions. Oh, excuse me, voice was going there. Yeah, I hopefully we've answered most of those questions. As I say, the people that we haven't got round to the questions, apologies, but we will get back to you on email. So I'd just like to hand over to the panel to say a last goodbye.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you very much for your time, everyone. I appreciate it, and thank you for the questions.
Oh, thank you for joining the call, taking the time out. It's only by us meeting together that we can really improve as a community. So I really thank everyone who came.
Yeah, thank you very much, and stay home, stay safe.
So I'd also like to thank all the people that volunteer their time. They're really acting on your behalf, and I think I've started to do a really good job. I'm really pleased with the way that the chapter is establishing from the Southeast Asia element, and I think the ability to pull together the different elements of the buying community and all these other activities is a really good thing to do in terms of developing the marketplace and making sure that we're providing good services. So I'd like to thank the members who have come, but also the people that couldn't come on this call for the contribution that they make on your behalf. I was going to single out Yvonne from AISP. She's been working with us for a long time, and she's going on to do something different now. So I was going to do a personal thanks to Yvonne for the contribution that she's made. But I think the more you put into the CREST chapter, the more you'll get out. So please participate and please work with us. So thank you very much.
And yeah, so thank you very much to the panel. Thank you very much for everyone that attended today and for your questions. And yes, all I can say is have a good rest of the day. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.